Okay, if we can have everybody come and sit down, that would be terrific. I would encourage those who are sitting in the back row to fill the front if you don't mind moving around. I'm glad you staked that position very early. I'm John Defterios. I'm a World Economic Forum Energy Fellow and a professor of business, a professor of practice as they call, at NYU Abu Dhabi. And the course that I did last year was focused entirely on how do you create the UAE as a global emerging market hub. So it dovetails very nicely on future by design, because if you look at the first 50 years of development in the country, it was built on trade and then evolved into finance, a phenomenal hub for the region, a great connector if you look at the role of Emirates Airline and what it's done connecting the bridge between East and West, Asia to Europe and the United States. But very importantly, in the context of Davos, to the global south, it made it a priority to go. And one of the things I always found very prescient about the UAE is that it has the future in mind in all policies. A lot of people think it's a lot of hot air, but having lived there for 10 years and having first gone to the UAE in 1990 during the invasion of Kuwait, you could see the spirit of trying to be a connector, a hub, and then looking at innovations for the future. And that's what the discussion about that we have here for the next half hour. Future by design, what's the next 50 years for the UAE? They just celebrated their 50th anniversary in 2021. And they have a very distinctive roadmap of what those next 50 years should look like. And we have a fantastic lineup of three, I would say, shining stars of the cabinet today. Ohood Bint Khalfan Roumi is the Minister of State for Government Development and the Future of the United Arab Emirates. I look at the sheet only because the titles get expanded. They don't change, but they expand your responsibilities. Sarah Amiri is the Minister of State for Public Education and Future Technology of the UAE, also a young global leader here at the World Economic Forum. And His Excellency Omar Sultan Olama is the Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, the Digital Economy, and Remote Work Applications. And when I saw him at the World Government Summit last year, I apologized because I left off one of them. He says, don't worry, they never shrink, but they expand over time. Can we give them a nice warm welcome first? And thanks for such a nice turnout for the session. I'm sure we have more coming in. And I want to remind our three ministers, this is being live streamed as well. So be cognizant of the fact that this is a very wide audience that's very curious about what's taking place. I think we should also recognize, as a great connector that I talked about before, many were skeptical around the pandemic whether you could pull off an expo in the midst of such a huge global challenge. It was delayed, but that didn't do anything in terms of turnout of numbers, which exceeded expectations. Number two, you've seen the role of the UAE in the climate discussion in COP28. The head of ADNOC, who also is a senior member of the cabinet as Minister of Industry and Advanced Technology, the chairman of Masdar, quite controversial to the outside world, but for those who spent time in the Gulf region, the broader Middle East and North Africa, don't find any controversy, and we can perhaps even address that in the questions. Just did a session with Aramco, which discussed why it's a good decision to have somebody from the oil and gas sector, but one that has served in climate for the last 15 years to be involved in that discussion. But having Expo as a World Expo and then COP28 in the UAE shows the connectivity I was talking about before. We're going to play a short video, and then I'm going to have Her Excellency Ohood Roumi come up and give her opening remarks before we get to our two presentations by Sarah Amiri and Omar Olama. Thanks again for your time. If we can go ahead and roll that video, that would be great. Thank you. likes our technical team to say if it's working afterwards, because after the presentation we can give that another go. But the pictures are so powerful, and it does also have revealing scripts, so you got the spirit of it, I think, right? Would you like to go ahead and take the stage? Minister Roumi is going to give us a short opening remarks, and then we'll go to our two presentations. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure to be here with you today and have the opportunity to share some insights from my country, the United Arab Emirates. The UAE as a nation was founded on 2nd of December 1971. So like the World Economic Forum, we turned 50 in 2021. Those 50 years have been most disruptive and transformative in history. We witnessed the fastest population growth in human history, from a world of 3.8 billion in 1971 to 8 billion people today. We are living in a truly remarkable age, massive leaps in technology and science, accelerating dramatic transformations in all walks of our life. And we will continue to do so for at least the next 50 years. This global transformation created an environment that is today more challenging and complex than ever before. It is also an environment full of future opportunities and potential. Today, we have the opportunity to unleash the power of humanity like never before. This is where governments come in. We believe that the best way to be ready for the future is to imagine it, design it, and execute it. We see this as a core role for our government, a future designer. Governments need to be forward-looking, invent new operating models, leverage technology, and work with multi-stakeholders to create positive and lasting impact. They must become platforms for future design. More importantly, governments need to change focus from only dealing with short-term issues to inclusive, multi-generational well-being. This is the spirit of the UAE. We are a future nation by design. This is why the UAE National Day, the 2nd of December, was named by the UNESCO as World Futures Day. A young nation, 50 years old, the UAE now tops global indicators. This was not by coincidence. It was all by design and by focusing on the future as our guiding North Star. Let me share with you 3 main principles from our UAE experience on government role as a future designer. 1 is to be driven by opportunities and not risks. Many say that we live in a world of polycrisis. We like to focus on the poly-opportunity. In fact, we launched yesterday from Davos a new index about future possibilities. The second principle is to leapfrog development. Our government thinks big, focuses on moonshots and delivers them with speed, not just incremental changes over time. Talking about moonshots, I'm delighted to be joined today by 2 pioneering government future designers, Minister Sara Al-Amiri and Minister Omar Al-Olama, who will talk about how the UAE is designing our future today. The third principle is global cooperation and tolerance. Despite all our differences, we all share one earth. We all share one resources. We must learn to live, work, and build a future together. We are proud today that the UAE is home to over 200 nationalities. And this year, the UAE, in collaboration with the World Economic Forum, is hosting the Global Future Councils to help design the future narrative of global emerging issues. The UAE will also take over the presidency of COP28. We will focus on collaborations and opportunities to build a more sustainable future for our world. A few months later, we will chair the World Trade Organization MC13. Our focus will remain on openness, collaboration to design a new globalization model that adds value to all. I hope we can all join hands in adopting a multifaceted, multi-generational, whole of society, future design approach that leaves no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for that. And you said you'd go 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and you should be working in television because you hit it right on the button. So thank you very much. We're going to skip the introductions between each one. I'm going to introduce Sarah Amiri. She's going to introduce her colleague, the cabinet minister. To get you the context, I met Ohood at the PMO's office, Prime Minister's office, working, I think, on the 5th World Government Summit in my time at CNN. And I kind of walked out of the meeting pretty blown away because she had complete control of all 30 men in the room. And I thought, okay, this is the future, right? I think more than half the cabinet, or very close to it, are women today. Am I right? Yes. Yes. And they're not, it's not wallpaper or pretty pictures. They're people that deliver. I don't want to talk too long because I want to leave the chance for the presentations and at least 10 minutes for questions from the floor, right? If we can we give a warm welcome to Sarah Amiri, please? Thank you very much.
A very good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. Ohood spoke about future by design, something that is in our DNA. But how do you break it down for a nation to go 50 years with the arrival of Mars, to go through 50 years with doubling its economic impact, with indicators showing that it's punching well above its weight? And we continuously get asked in forums such as the World Economic Forum, why, how, what is the recipe, what's the secret, what is it that makes the Emirates work? We go back to a few questions and thoughts to understand what makes an innovation work and what makes growth work. What is the driving force of innovation? And a key driving force of innovation is crisis. So let's go back to 2 crises at different points in time that the world went through. COVID-19, I know we don't want to mention it in this WEF, but let's do it. COVID-19 expedited scientifically an area of science, which is the development of mRNA vaccines. It would have taken a decade, what took a year of expedited development. Why? People driven by a real need to find a solution because we were in crisis. People, institutions, legislations, all of it worked for the benefit of finding a solution to this global crisis. Let's take another one. Go back in history. The space race gave us amazing technologies. It was because of defense spending. We got the GPS, we got the internet, we got to where we are today in the basics of transistors because of crises that was developed, that stemmed from defense spending. Again, what did it create? The perfect recipe for growth. A real need and drive for change. A sense that we need to transform and find a solution today. And then devising everything in our earthly power, from the human potential to the institutional potential, to find solutions to these challenges. So what drives crises and creates this perfect bed for innovation? Clearly a sense of urgency. How do you harness the sense of urgency without a crisis? That's the recipe of the Emirates. A sense of urgency to continuously develop because we need to prosper. Why do we need to prosper? Because we value human potential and investment in human potential as the key driver to change. And how does that translate into a sense of urgency? It means that you continuously ensure that you're investing in development, investing in growth, and ensuring that you're continuously progressing year upon year. That is a sense of urgency decoupled from crisis. And that is the key driver that we took across a few sectors. So I'll give you a few examples on a few sectors of how we utilize this sense of urgency. I'll go to the space sector firstly. The UAE was a utilizer of space technologies. We moved towards having our quote-unquote moonshot program to Mars. That was an extremely risky undertaking. The team did not sleep for well over 7 years because of the risk of whether or not it succeeded. We've never done this before. The approach was quite different. The mechanism and the means by which we wanted to develop was quite different. What drove us? A real sense of urgency, knowing that science and technology is required and fundamental part of growth for the future of our economy and the future of our industrial sectors. And we continue to invest in the space sector so that we can spring the development of a private space sector. And we're today utilizing several missions, including a mission due to launch in 2028 to the asteroid belt, going even further than where we reached. We take that into economic development. Spoke about the importance and the sense of urgency of science and technology. We started investing in it well over 15 years ago. Now, how do we translate that into economic value? We have a technology transformation program developed and now embedded across our industrial strategy. And what that means is, how do you sustainably, yes, sustainability is part of it, and effectively increase the impact of your existing economic sectors? And we're working very closely with key industrial players locally to be able to do that. But also fostering more global partnerships so that we can create the necessary relevance and impact and be able to grow together as global industries. The second is growing new sectors of the economy. So your growth of the economy needs a continuous influx of new sectors of the economy. Again, investing in science and technology to be able to become those drivers of transformation across industrial sectors. And I think you'll hear from Omar one of those economic sectors and how we're fostering development there. We then move to research and development. You're transforming your economy to one that's based on science and technology that requires the creation of new knowledge to be able to create more value. That's your commodity now, and that's your investment in people. So research and development now becomes core. In this 5-year segment, we've defined what we want from research and development. It is capability and capacity development. It is answers to the challenges that we will face in the coming decade. And it is also finding the necessary means to create economic opportunity. So our research and development strategy goes from energy transition, ensuring that sustainability is infused across the value chain, because we do have a 2050 commitment as a nation, and also working towards finding better access to food with low utilization of overhead resources, and again, economic development across healthcare and other sectors. Taking on research and development and being able to create this is what we mean by future by design. So it's not about solving our problems today through economic growth plans, through industrial strategies, through focusing like we did in the space sector, but ensuring that we have the tools down the line to be able to ensure that the sense of urgency is maintained and development is maintained across the board. Then it comes to sustainability. I spoke about industrial growth. And industrial growth, unfortunately, till today, is always coupled with not being sustainable. We're working on decoupling that. You can, if you effectively deploy the right technologies and the right means of development and the right cooperation mechanisms across key industries, lower the carbon footprint of those activities. And we've managed to do it in the oil and gas sector. But we want to continue to ensure that that's being done across all sectors. Industrial development needs to be done with a lens of sustainability, because the future, the sense of urgency is here, the future of our planet is very important, and we need to all be conscious players. And hence why our drive for development always takes into account the sustainability pillar. I can give you a concrete example. In our technology deployment program with key industrial players, we have actually included a sustainability pillar to ensure that they are also adopting technologies that will increase their sustainability while also increasing effectiveness and delivery of those different companies. And as we transition forward, the UAE has spent tens of billions of dollars in the last 15 years in sustainability. We are hosting COP28 at the end of this year. And the sustainability agenda is very important for us. It's not something that was pulled out of thin air. It is something that has been continuously, proactively, and consciously engaged for more than a decade and a half. And it's through these different pillars of development and these different mechanisms of ensuring that you have an internal drive or a sense of urgency to ensure that you're developing, to ensure that people are invested in, to ensure that your sectors are robust and dynamic and continue to drive growth forward. And with this, I'd like to hand it over to Omar to continue.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending. And I think Her Excellency talked about two crises. There's a third crisis I'd like to mention, which is being asked to be the follow-up act after these two inspirational young women. And I'll try to make sure that the engagement level is just as high. Ladies and gentlemen, we always talk about the UAE's journey as the last 50 years. But I'm here to argue that our DNA has not been a DNA that's focused on decades, but millennia. And this has lasted for many years. We've always been a nation of resilient, adaptive, and agile individuals that make up the society of the UAE. 4,000 years ago, our part of the world was a place on the map. We were not an underdeveloped village outpost. It was actually a thriving commerce hub between the Western civilization at the time of Egypt and the Eastern civilization at the time of India. And the UAE was where trade used to happen. And that is actually something that you can see in a museum in the UAE called the Saruq al-Hadid Museum. From millennia, from centuries, we see that there's always a constant need to adapt, to reinvent ourselves, and to face all challenges and opportunities equally. We also see that with every single era, the people of the UAE choose an industry and they go all in it. If you look at the trade of pearls, for example, pearl trade became a key industry that the UAE focused on. But we did not focus on local markets. We wanted to become global players in this key industry. We also have a pedagogy. Our pedagogy is balancing between internal development and external expansion as well. And I'd like to give you two key examples here. If you look at internal development, the UAE in 50 years, so in 5 decades, has ranked first in over 150 global indicators. Our citizens in the UAE can travel to over 180 destinations visa-free. This requires a lot of hard work from the government to ensure that the people feel like this country is progressing and they are welcomed by everyone in the world. There's also a commitment to the external world, a commitment to try to create a better future for our neighbors and to create a better future for our world. And the two examples I'd like to give here is an example to teach 1 million people how to code in the Arab world. This program has concluded last year and has ended up in creating tens of thousands of companies and business endeavors across the Arab world, instilling hope into people across age groups and across geographies as well. We also are committed to the climate agenda. We have announced with the United States of America of creating a fund of $100 billion to ensure sustainable transition into renewable energy and also into trying to meet our climate demands globally. Her Excellency Sarah and Her Excellency Ohood talked about two secrets. One on the country level, which is the principles of the UAE, and one on the societal level, which is what Her Excellency Sarah talked about with regards to the societal way of actually having this sense of urgency and being able to adapt. I'd like to give you the operational level, so zoom in a little bit more. How are we able to become agile, adaptive, and really exploit the opportunities that are around us? The first is we believe that with every new trend, there needs to be investment in infrastructure. Infrastructure as roads, infrastructures as buildings, but also key infrastructure and hardware, computing power, latency, and internet connectivity. Reducing latency is very important for self-driving cars, for example, and that's why the UAE has invested in 5G. The UAE has invested in having the 16th fastest supercomputer in the world in the United Arab Emirates, and opening it to academia, opening it to startups is the key to creating the next unicorns and to creating the opportunities that are there for the society. The second is talent. We talked about 200 nationalities. We don't want to just attract 200 nationalities to the UAE. We've already done that. How do you attract the best and the brightest? How do we unleash opportunities for them? And how do we make them create the future from the UAE? That is what we always strive for and work towards. The third is regulations. The third is regulations. It is paramount for us to ensure that our regulations match the pace of innovation and that we are proactive rather than reactive. The way we work in the UAE is we do not wait for something to go wrong for us to regulate. We actually start regulating with the business community, with individuals on the ground, and then keep adapting and being agile to ensure that our regulations are the best. And then finally, scale. We can't afford to think small. And we believe that pessimism does not inspire or motivate people. It is important for us to think beyond our borders. And you can see that with our port operator that operates in over 80 countries around the world, our airlines, whether it's Etihad or Emirates, and all of the programs that we have do not look and are not confined by our boundaries. They are global ventures that focus on the whole world rather than just a specific nationality or a specific country. The final thing I want to say, and I think this is one thing that differentiates us to every other country in the world, is the fact that if we think about how people were inspired to create the future, it has always been through orators. People standing in front of an audience and saying, I have a dream, or saying, we will achieve going to the moon by the end of the decade. But there is a new model. This was the model of the last millennia. There is a new model. And our model is a model of taking people to the future, making them live it, making them feel it, making them touch it, and making them believe that it is so real that all they do every single day is want to strive to achieving that future. So we took a big bet, and we said to ourselves, we are going to build the most beautiful building in the world. This building is actually one that you can visit. And it is a testament not just to our ambitions to the future, but to taking people towards the future, giving them that vision, giving them that dream. And by the time they leave this building, they come to the present. And every single waking day, what drives them is the ambition to try to achieve that future and to reach into it. Thank you very much.
This room is in high demand, so we're not going to bring the chairs over. No, that's okay. We don't have the time for it. But if Sarah can stand in the middle and Omar flanking me as bookends to you, I'm just going to ask a question of them each because we do need to wrap. Just through my experiences, I covered the invasion of Kuwait, and I thought they did this really clever story of the UAE becoming the Hong Kong of the Middle East. And I said, but is it under threat because of the crisis? And I had His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid tell me when he was Minister of Defense, we actually thrive through crisis. Thank you very much. I made the mistake you told me not to have the panel do, so sorry about that. Thanks. But we've had a global financial crisis, the Iran-Iraq war, the Gulf War, not in that order, of course, pandemic. I think this is a good question for you, Sarah. Do they create an opportunity to advance? It's not like the shock, oh my God, we just slid back 5 years. Is it a reset opportunity? Is that what we learned from the pandemic, for example, at least in your generation?
It's an opportunity to reflect and move forward. So the biggest problems of crisis is actually, or failure points, is standing still. While for the Emirates, these different crises was a state of motion. So how do you create opportunity out of this crisis? What are the issues that you have that you need to circumvent down the line? I'll take the COVID as an example. The reactions that the UAE put into place was with the knowledge that we were making a lot of decisions without having all the data and information out there to be able to make effective decisions. But that was okay because your decision-making process then has to turn into iterative decision-making process. And that's where the difference is in transforming these moments of crises and moments of challenges into opportunities while understanding that you need to drive your nation through them.
Okay, very good. In fact, that was the mother of all challenges for all governments, I think. And I was living in the UAE, and there was a whole trust factor that was put to play. So it was trust first, and then delivering on the promise of responding to the crisis. Omar, if you don't mind addressing, you touched upon it in your presentation, which I thought was very clever, but globalization is not very fashionable after COVID-19. We talk about regional blocks and the global supply chain broke down. And I think it was you at one of the modules there that said that, we thrive off of globalization, so we have to be torch barriers for globalization. It's not a lot of hot air, but why is that so important? Is it the population? We know the nationalities, but this is an economy that would die without globalization. Is that how you see it?
So I don't think it's as existential as that in terms of a risk, but it's important to think about our need to have scale. Our need to have scale can only be achieved with globalization. One thing that we know is we will adapt to any change that happens. If globalization dies tomorrow, there are going to be regional blocks, and we are going to work with them. At the end of the day, the UAE will adapt to any challenge, but it will ensure that there are equal opportunities for everyone on its land and through its trade relations as well.
Okay, very good. The team was very kind to reset the audio, so I think as the closing exclamation point to our half hour together, because we have to vacate the room. If you go ahead and prepare the video, let's give a nice thanks, a round of applause to all three of our ministers. Thanks very much. The video will play, and then after the video, we can just exit the room. It's great to see all three of you, and thank you for your attention. Very much for doing that. Thanks.